You're listening to KNX In Depth along with Rob Archer. I'm Charles Feldman.
The CDC has come out with some provisional data. It shows the number of suicides across the country last year hit an all-time high.
Yeah, close to 50,000 people took their own lives. That's up almost 3% from 2021. Dr. Mark Goulston is a retired psychiatrist and former UCLA psychiatry professor who specialized in suicide prevention. In fact, none of his patients died by suicide in over 35 years. Doctor, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So these figures from the CDC, especially if people haven't been paying much attention to the subject matter, I think should shock folks. What do you attribute this rise in suicides to?
Well, there's an increase in gun-related suicides. There's also an increase in mental health issues. I think one of the main things is emotional isolation. There's lots of things that contribute to suicide and depression. One of the things I discovered, though, in my 35 years of work is that nearly all suicidal patients feel despair at the end of their lives. They feel unpaired with reasons to live, hopeless, helpless, worthless, purposeless, meaningless, useless. That's especially true for men. And they pair with death to take the pain away. They know that suicide, death will take the pain of being unpaired with all those reasons to live. And that's especially true for men. As men get older and they age out of the workforce, when men start to feel useless, they start to feel worthless. They're not the best communicators. And there's also an increase for women. I think what contributes to that is that, many families don't live close to each other. A lot of women's identity is defined by their connection, especially to their families, but a lot of times their children live far away. Their children are very busy. And so I think one of the things that is a saving grace for women over men is that women connect emotionally better and more frequently than men do, and men have real trouble connecting.
There are a lot of threads that I sense, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. On the one hand, from the other side, there are those who say that nowadays everyone is focusing more on their own feelings. And while there's a part of that that's good, there's another part of that that's bad, because the more you focus on yourself, the more you magnify your problems within yourself. So there's that oversensitivity. On the other hand, we do seem to be living in more anxious, fear-laden times. And we do have social media, which has served to not bring us together, but to maybe kind of separate us and make us feel even more lonely. Which factor do you think has a greater influence? Are we focusing on ourselves too much? Would that help? Or are we really just feeling a lot more anxious and fear-laden because of the times that we live in?
I think all of those contribute. I think we are feeling more anxious. We're feeling more powerless, and the more powerless and helpless we feel, the more anxious, agitated we feel also. Also, I think what's happened with the internet is internet plays to excitement. Younger people have been addicted to excitement, and it's away from emotional connectivity. In fact, many younger people, and for that matter, older people, don't know how to emotionally connect with each other, because when you emotionally connect with each other, you actually trigger a burst of this emotional hormone, which is called oxytocin, which people have heard about, and that lessens cortisol, which is the stress hormone. But if you don't know how to emotionally connect, you don't know what to do. And also younger people are addicted to adrenaline as a way to find pleasure. And the media corporations love addicting people, because when you go off the crash of excitement, you have to feed the monster, and you keep feeding it and you keep feeding it. And that drives up sales, but it also drives up an incredible sense of isolation.
One of the figures in this CDC report that is somewhat promising, I suppose, is that there seems to, at least last year or the year before, there's been a drop in suicide by some younger people, and it was attributed to some degree to better outreach by schools. And if that's the case, then Obviously, there are things that can be done both for younger and older people. You yourself, as we said in our lead-in, you had in 35 what plus years, you didn't lose a patient to suicide. So, what are the things that can be done for all those age groups to try to mitigate this thing?
Well, they changed the suicide hotline to 988 because that makes it easier to call. So that's been helpful. There's been more discussion about mental health and suicide in schools, although many schools want to stay away from it like the plague because it scares parents. So I think that is good for youth. I've been working with someone whose 14-year-old son killed himself 5 years ago, and we do presentations. He has a documentary called What I Wish My Parents Knew, and he interviews teenagers about what they never got to tell their parents because their parents were always triggered by those teenagers. And we've given out 4 prompts that parents can use with their teenagers, but you can use it with someone you care about. Here are the 4 prompts. Do it while you're doing an activity together because people can't stand heart-to-heart talks unless they initiate it. First prompt is you say to that person, at your worst, how awful are you capable of feeling about your life or yourself? And then as they talk, keep them talking. The second prompt is when you're feeling that way, how alone are you feeling? And you keep them talking about that. The third prompt is, tell me about the last time you felt that, because something magical happens when someone tells you specifically about a time they felt that low, and you can see it with your eyes as they're telling you it. They re-feel it, but they're not alone. And then what you want to tell that person is, hopefully you will have earned their eye contact and say, look at me. There's nothing more important to me than helping you feel less alone when you feel that awful. So the next time you're heading down that road, you need to reach out to me and do whatever you can to get my undivided attention, your mom's undivided attention, your dad's undivided attention, because there's nothing more important than helping you feel less alone when you feel that bad. And if you think you're being a burden, if you open up to us, you're giving us a gift.
All right. Excellent advice. Dr. Mark Goulston, they're a retired psychiatrist. Once again, if you
All right, Dr. Goulston, thank you so much for joining us today.
that deep darkness that you can get lost in,
Appreciate your time. Have a great day.
referenced it, I'll tell it to you again. It's 988. Just dial that number. You can also text that number, 988, if you need help.